Jesse here, gonna do a little composite video of a lot of the things we've got going on, taking the farm from the summer crops to the fall crops. It's a distinctly different thing than flipping it over in the spring when you're often dealing with fresh beds with nothing in them, or you're dealing with cover crops. In this case, we're dealing with cover crops, we're dealing with some weeds, we're dealing with just various crops that we don't deal with in the springtime. We're also dealing with heat, trying to figure out germination, so I'm gonna cover all that, jam this video full of stuff. So, let's do it. What are you talking about over there, Cricket? If you're not subscribed to this channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you are subscribed, you're awesome. Here's the thing. In the summertime, we're often growing kind of longer season crops, so perhaps underneath of them, you end up with some weed issues. So one of the things I want to talk about is dealing with weeds without tillage, right? Because back in the day when we were a tillage farm, we would mow it, we'd till it under, rake it off or whatever, and then maybe replant in a couple weeks. That was generally how we dealt with a weedy bed. I didn't even conceive of doing it any other way. However, in the no-till world, it's a little different. All right, so you may recognize this bed, for an example, as one of the beds that was in the relay cropping video. I had green onions there, and I started to pull half the green onions. I planted cucumbers into that green onion bed, and then we started to allow the rest of the green onions to bulb up, and then kind of have the cucumbers take over the bed. It wasn't really great. Like, we got some weed issues. The cucumbers just never really took off very well. Anyway, you know, it's flash to a couple months later, we have kind of a weedy bed that needs to be dealt with. So to deal with that in a no-till fashion actually requires, you actually have some options. If you're dealing with weed seeds, all of those have to come out. That's the very first thing to think about, is grasses or anything that have weed seeds on it, those have to be cut out and removed from the garden. If you're dealing with just kind of younger grasses and that sort of thing, you have a few options, and they kind of go like this. One, you can mow it, see what regrows, and then just hoe those out. That's an option. Two, you can mow it, cover it with cardboard, and then cover that with compost and replant it. We've done that a couple times, works really well. I do suggest actually getting through the cardboard when you start transplanting, only because stuff needs to get to the native soil to get all the micronutrients and macronutrients that it needs. It's not gonna get everything it needs from the compost, generally speaking, unless you just have really amazing compost. So the option that I went with was actually my favorite option, and I do this a lot, is if I have a weedy bed, I just get down on my hands and knees and I pull all those weeds and I immediately replant it. That is the most effective way to get every single weed out and then get it photosynthesizing really quickly. If you have transplants going in, that's ideal. I generally won't direct seed those beds, but you could. Again, if you're going by hand, it doesn't take as long as you think it does unless it is a straight mat of grass. You go through, cut out the roots, pull up any plants that have to come out, pull out any of the plants with seeds on them, and then you just rake it clean, recompost or whatever, remineralize it you have to do, and then you can just replant it. That's one of my favorite options. And so that's what we did here. There's the moon. The other thing I kind of mentioned there were longer season crops that may develop weeds underneath them. So in this case, I'm talking about sweet corn. Pretty long crop, takes about 75 days once it's in the ground. Even from transplant, we transplanted those in May, and then yeah, we just harvested them. So anyway, some weeds develop underneath them. So my thing is, I like to have that corn mulch put back on the soil, but I also can't do that over top of weeds because all you're doing is mulching a bunch of weeds and then you have to go through and hand pull them anyway. So you kind of have two options for this. The first, if you really want to get into those beds quickly, is go through and pull out your weeds out from underneath the corn. This is what I did. And then mow it, and then you can transplant or direct seed into that. And that's what I did here. So a couple weeds may still pop up because you're gonna miss some, but that way all of the weeds are out of the way, and you can go ahead and mow. And then that way you're also not transplanting any that may have seeds on them. And that's just the easiest way to get rid of the weeds that are above like longer season crops, or like this other squash bed that you can see had some weeds around it. That was another relay crop that actually went really well. We got carrots out of it, and then we got the squash in it. I didn't get the third crop of green onions, but I did get that squash for 6 or 7 weeks in the field. So we pulled that out, pulled all those weeds out, and then I was able to directly go ahead and replace that with another crop. And same with the corn, able to direct seed using the Jang with the double disc. I don't think I took any footage of that, but that's what happened. Able to reseed that immediately to fall crops, to beets and spinach, because the nice light mulch helps to keep the soil a little cooler. This technique I kind of want to talk about is I actually did with this bed here. You can see it looks pretty mulchy still. And what I did here is all of the lettuce I cut out of here, all of the squash that we cut out of here, and some of the corn stalks that just kind of got knocked down, we placed it all on one single bed and mowed it. Now, the advantage of that is that what you get is a really nice thick green mulch that if you wait a couple days turns into a nice mulch. So this, I felt like could use a little more mulch, but I didn't want to put more compost down. I'm trying to use less compost, so I'm not adding a heavier nutrient load. So yeah, put down those green manures, mowed them and let them dry a little bit, and then I was able to direct seed that with a nice kind of lighter colored mulch on top of it, which is great because one of the big things you run into in the summertime is germination issues. So like, so this plot, this was all summer cover cropped, mowed it, I did tarp it. It's not my favorite thing, but in that situation, my mower was down, so I didn't really have a choice. What I prefer to do with cover crops is to mow them twice. Mow them once, wait a week, mow them really heavy again with the flail mower lowered, and that usually kills all the cover crop or the majority of it, and then I can just pick the rest out. My mower went down, I didn't have that option, so I did mow this lightly, and then I didn't get that second mowing, so I threw tarp over top of it and killed it off. And then I sowed it to carrots, and I'll show you these over here. And then I put the tarp back on, white side up. This is a recommendation that I got from Casey Ostwinch of Honey Tree Farm, which I really like if you have tarps with white sides. We're trying to go away from plastic more and more, and we've been successful at it, but we have these tarps and we might as well use them. Sow your seed, cover it with the white side, let the crop germinate, pull it off before the crop is fully germinated so that you don't run into weedy issues, and then you also want to pull it off at night so it at least has or in the evening, so at least has overnight to adapt, because you don't want to pull it off and have like little germs in burning hot sun. So that's kind of what we did here, and that was pretty successful, even down to radishes. See? Those radishes were done the same way. Yep. And I've also thought that if you wanted to avoid the plastic, you could also use like a paper mulch. This is Weed Guard Plus, and it's like it's just an OMRI approved paper mulch, but you could lay that out over a single bed and probably get similar germination results. And having a good plan for direct seeding is important, but also having a good plan for keeping fresh young transplants cool is also important. So we have just this little overhead irrigation that actually doesn't do big droplets. It does kind of a mist, more of a mist. We like that because we can use that for cooling off plants. So we'll run that multiple times through the course of a hot day just to cool the plants off. And that kind of gets us away from having to use something like shade cloth very often. We have been experimenting with it and the results are great, but if I can avoid buying and using more plastic, I will. This is Sesbania. Isn't that cool? What a crazy looking plant. That is a summer legume. So it grows well in a dry farmed area, and we used it on some of these cover crop plots. Okay, so I mentioned the cover crop thing where I mow twice. Once, mow it again a week later. I couldn't do that with this because the mower went down. Anyway, mowed this through the plastic that you can see there, over top of it for a few days, really hot days, in hopes that it would solarize it, and it just didn't quite kill that Sudan grass. I didn't know that when I transplanted these fall brassicas in here, which are doing pretty well, but so too is some of this Sudan grass, unfortunately. I undersowed it. You can see I undersowed it with a bunch of different stuff. There's some cilantro and parsley and various things to have some green manure, so I wanted some green manure underneath here anyway. But what I didn't want is the Sudan grass coming back. So I'm having to battle the Sudan grass a little bit. But you can see where I've mowed twice was what I originally wanted. Like this you can see all the cilantro and stuff. But this is what I wanted, where it's just an occasional, these are the pathways where I was able to mow a second time, and you can see this is what I wanted, like where it's just an occasional weed or Sudan grass. Like in the beds where I wasn't able to mow as much, you get a much denser, you know, stand of Sudan grass. So that's kind of a mistake. I can't tell. It's a little bit more work than I wanted. It's definitely that. The brassicas look fine, but it's going to be me battling a little bit of Sudan grass until a frost. But I still think it would be an effective method to mow it twice and then plant it, but you got to get that second mowing in. Otherwise, you're going to be, even with the solarization, you're going to be battling Sudan grass. So I don't know that that'll be helpful to anybody, but it was helpful to me to kind of see that in action, see that the solarization wasn't going to quite kill that Sudan grass. Like here you can see this is after the first mowing, right? So we'll get some stuff that'll come back like this, and I'll come back and do a second mowing to keep as many of those roots in the soil as I can, and then I'll drill and seed directly into this. That'll also help me to pick out any weeds, because sometimes in that cover crop you can't see grasses and stuff. So it helps when you've got it all mowed down and you can see the perennials coming back, and then you can pull those out and then mow it and then transplant. Anyway, that's it. I gotta go move my sheep and get to work. Like this video if you like this video. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. Say hi, sheep. Say hi, sheep. No enthusiasm. Subscribe, all those things. Anyway, we'll see you all later. Thanks for watching. Bye.